All right, let's go ahead and get started on some of our lecture. I would much rather be in class and be able to get some responses from everybody, but it is what it is. So bear with me as I get kind of rolling back in and get with these videos. It's much easier and much better to be in the classroom, but we'll do the best we can. So as you can read here, basics of criminal law. This is going where we're going to start with things, set a foundation. And one thing I want to talk about is, in essence, what sets criminal law apart and substantive criminal law apart from what either you've already studied or what you will later on. We'll get to that, like I said, the specific difference between substantive and procedural in just a few minutes. But for right now, as far as criminal law specifically, it talks about the different prohibition, or in essence, things that are prohibited or required, like illegal behaviors, okay? So it talks about illegal behaviors, what's accepted, what's not. It also talks about the punishment for those particular offenses, which differs from offense to offense. We'll talk about, if as long as time allows, we'll talk about the idea of, how mandated sentencing and how that can impact the individual, the criminal justice system, all different types of sentencing that we may have based on the state, based on the level of offense and things like that. So, like I said, what illegal behaviors, punishment available, and also you're going to be looking at defenses available. For example, that's something that we'll discuss defenses later, like towards the end of the semester. However, the one thing I will say is, here and there we'll touch on some stuff. But for example, one defense, some people might say I was under duress. Okay, well, there are some places where you can use duress as a defense. You can use intoxication in some cases, but for example, murder is not one of those cases when you can use duress as your excuse. You can't even use it intoxication. It would just be put in a different category of murder, but nonetheless, or even maybe manslaughter. But the case is, or the point is, that you cannot use, for example, duress as a defense for certain crimes like murder. Okay. Also, crime. Exactly what is it? It's anything that is defined as being illegal. So, people say, "Oh, well, wouldn't that make every crime or every violation of a rule or a law a crime?" Not necessarily, right? We have civil and criminal cases in courts. So the question here is, what is the difference between criminal and tort law? Basically, to try to sum that up, it's going to be tort law is more so business-oriented or individual-oriented, meaning like crimes against a person or business in the civil realm of things. So it's not criminal, it's a type of civil court or civil offense, okay? The other thing, people might think, oh yeah, you committed a crime against a person such as battery. You are inflicting some type of damage on that person or that property. That's true. It is somewhat personal, but it's not a personal offense in the fact that the statute was actually created by the state or governing body for society as a whole. So that's the difference, and that's what sets apart things, that would be a criminal offense. That's like when that's why when you see court cases or hear about them, you'll see it might say Indiana versus Jones. Okay, that's because it's the state of Indiana that has charged Mr. Jones with a particular crime. It's not the person who he committed the offense against. It's the state or the governing body which the statute was written by. Okay, so just to clear that up a little bit. And the next thing is, what is the difference? You're probably thinking, what's the difference between substantive and procedural law? So substantive, which is what we're talking about now, and kind of review what we just said a little bit ago, is list out the prohibitions. It lists out punishment, in essence, who can be punished, how they can be punished, and also, like I said, down there, the punishment options kind of covers how they can be punished. It also gets into, in essence, protections they may have, but it's more so, like I said, just who can be punished, and what are those options. Okay. Procedural is more along the lines of anything that deals with law enforcement or the criminal justice system. It goes from the time that you interact with people, the time you put them in custody, all the way through to, through court proceedings. So some examples of that might be search and seizure, Miranda, interrogations, confessions, how they're handled, which is typically tied to Miranda. But yeah, that's the biggest difference. And there's a lot to procedural, but it's more specific to those who are working in the criminal justice system. And in this major, obviously, it's much more specific to us as far as working as police officers or troopers or what the case may be, right? So let's go ahead and move on. Check my time here. There are three areas that we want to focus on, or that society, in essence, tries to focus on. The first one is offender punishment. Okay. Second, we have community protection, and then you have the offender protection. So yeah, all three of these, and it's typically the first two are what people tend to think about the most, and either more concerned about, or at least that's about the only thing they really know about. They don't really think about the offender protection that is already offered. They may say, oh, we need to protect offenders, but they fail to remember or know that we already actually have a lot of those in place. So maybe we can try to find ways to improve that, but there are some already in place. So the first one of those I want to talk about is going to be the offender punishment. As you can read on there, the idea behind our behind our criminal justice system, which is basically same, whether it be here in the U.S. or anywhere in the world, they pretty much have the same goals. We just have different ways of going about doing so. And for those who want to complain about the U.S. Criminal justice system, a couple things. One, there are things that we can improve upon. However, the other thing is our criminal justice system provides so many more freedoms, so many more options than any other out in the world. So if anybody wants to complain about that, I guess it would do them well to look at other countries and see what those countries do, in essence, to protect their people and to protect their citizens and also protect the offenders. And you'll find out the U.S. does a pretty good job of it, even though we can improve. Okay. So, like it says here, infliction of suffering, unpleasant consequences. That's there's always been a thing with the idea of punishment is to make that person, I don't want to use the word pay for what they've done, but there should be some consequences to their actions that were prohibited. And typically they were, whether it be something that was in addition to being illegal, it's also considered in essence immoral or just an overall wrong that anybody would see as whether there was a law against it or not. That's just something you don't do. Okay, so those are all things that, like I said, that idea of put someone in a position to where that they can learn their lesson, they can understand what to or what not to do. In essence, restructure behavior. It's kind of a redirect behavior. Okay. A lot of times, as it says on there, it means to an end, meaning that punishment of the offender. Sometimes you don't have a better way of getting that across or helping teaching that lesson of what you should and shouldn't do. There's not a better option than to actually punish them through the different things we'll talk about, like deterrence, rehabilitation, retribution, restoration, things like that. So, good question for you to consider would be this next one says, is retribution same as revenge? So that's kind of debatable, but the general, and that I wrote the court case down. It's a 1930 court case, Commonwealth versus Ritter, talking about this whole idea of retribution, revenge, and the courts. I would highly recommend. It's a really, really simple read, but I would recommend looking it up in your book, which I believe it's on. It's like early on, maybe in your book. I gotta think what page it's actually on. But either way, it's that section, chapter 1, section 1, it talks about the Commonwealth versus Ritter case and the overall idea of what retribution is and how whether it's the same as revenge or not. So I recommend you read that. I recommend you read the court case itself outside the book. But I'm trying to summarize it. It basically, the overall idea is that retribution is not revenge, because typically when we look at revenge or we think of revenge, we want to, a couple things. One, a lot of times we want to do the whole like one up somebody. So whatever you did, whatever wrong you committed to me, I'm going to up the ante on it and do something a little bit worse to you. That's not necessarily the case with what retribution is supposed to be. So retribution is still making someone have consequences so that they can learn what they did was wrong, and so they know that, or deterrence for themselves or for other people. Um, if I see someone get caught for something they did, and I see the punishment is not something I would want to go through, well, then maybe that will deter me from getting involved with that kind of behavior, whether it be theft, whether it be some type of violent behavior. That's an option. But retribution, in essence, is just because if I'm an offender and I commit a crime against you or your family, retribution is getting getting my just desserts, in essence. Excuse me, but it's not anything above and beyond. So whatever that level of offense I committed, retribution basically is just above that to say, hey, that was wrong. You're going to be punished for it. But revenge is going to be, this is the offense I committed. Revenge typically goes well above and beyond that. So what they're saying is there is a difference and less emotion involved with retribution, more of a, we'll talk about restoration. So retribution is closer to restoration than it is revenge. But I do recommend you, like I said, look at that court case and see what you think about it. Community protection, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. And then we may have to take a break just because of time. I'm going to try to keep it right around 15 minutes per video. But, okay, so community protection. How do we protect people in the community from the offenders? Denunciation is one way to think about it is, if a society thinks something as a whole, we think there's something wrong with a particular activity. I don't know too many people that think it's okay to go rape kids or molest children, things like that. That's what we will create, or if there's some disturbing thing that happens, we create some type of laws or statutes making it illegal. So therefore, that is society speaking to those individuals, saying, "Hey, we as society believe it's wrong, so therefore, that's our way of keeping people from doing it." Okay, incapacitation. Incapacitation is taking someone out of society so they don't harm anybody. There's something I want to come back to on a second video, because I'm going to pick up here after this, that I want to, actually I'll go ahead and talk about it now, and then just cut the video short here and pick up on the other parts of community protection in the second video. The interesting part about incapacitation is that, yeah, you're taking out of society to keep them from harming anybody else, but that truly doesn't keep them from harming anybody. Because while they're in prison, they could still be harmed or harm other people while they're in prison. So the concept of incapacitation is a little flawed in that sense. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, just simply because of time constraints, and I will pick back up with the other three, and we'll go from there.